Oi oi, welcome back to Toad. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I teased this video ever so slightly at the end of my last video, but I'll be building a Chaos Leman Russ, specifically based around the Knight of Piety tank case, and as such, theming the tank a bit more around him. The kits I used for this conversion was the obvious Leman Russ battle tank. I also then tapped into the Chaos Space Marine vehicle sprue, corridor gangers, kill team bloodied, and the free guild flagellant, but don't forget some assorted spare bits for trophies. To begin with, build your Leman Russ as whatever variant you want to. This tank is for an artillery corps in my army, so I went for 3 las cannons and a demolisher battle cannon. I personally didn't assemble the engine, that's because I wanted to use this part from Cromlech. It's an engine housing for their own line of tanks, but with a bit of shaving down it fits quite nicely on the back of the Leman Russ, and it also just makes the tank look closer to the Mars pattern. However, I didn't attach this right away due to the added weight that it adds to the model, so you will just see it appear later on in the video. It is resin, so you'll need to carefully clean it with soapy water and let it dry, but Cromlech are generally pretty good with this, and I would highly recommend any of their kits. I also decided to give the model a dozer blade. This is due to the fact that Chaos has always had a historical affinity to melee-themed armies. Regarding the dozer blade, if you're like me and use the part of the dozer blade that attaches it to the tank on the base, then you can use 2 las cannons as a mount for the tank. I did this by using my snips to cut off the muzzles of the las cannons, and upon seeing they fitted nicely onto the mounting chassis, I used my snips to then cut out a rectangle on the body of the gun, and also the part that was used to attach the las cannon to the tripod. After dry fitting the cannons against the underside of the tank, I cut down the ridges that appear on the base and cut a slant on the front of the cannons, so that they lined up flush against the tank. Now, this is a thoroughly impractical solution, but if you found yourself in my position, hopefully it helps. Back to the actual conversion. I wanted to bulk up the back of the model by adding some trophies of previous conflicts to the tank. I did this by taking a spare aggressor torso and an injured sister of battle from the Hospitalia base. However, feel free to use whatever trophies you want. I like to theme my armies as though they're fighting each other, but again, it's your decision to do this. I attached the aggressor torso to the tank by stuffing a blob of green stuff, made with more blue than yellow, into the cavity of the back and pressing it onto the tank. I then shaved down the visible excess with my knife and let it dry. I also rolled out some green stuffed sausages to act as entrails and attached them to the legs to cover up the weird flat area left on the aggressor body. Whilst it was drying, I used plastic cement and glued a spare sororitas, open hand, this was one from the Exorcist kit, into the missing armhole on the body, and then attached this body to the other side of the tank, again using plastic cement. I then let the green stuff dry for a few hours. For the heads, I cut a skull from the Citadel Skulls kit in half, so I just had the eyes and forehead left, and glued it to a helmetless head that I had cut the bare bit of the head off, leaving a half-helmeted look with a skull. I then used plastic cement to attach this to the aggressor body. For the Battle Sister, I simply placed a blob of plastic cement and dropped a full Citadel skull in place, and adjusted it with my knife till it had a position I liked. I then took a Phobos Marine pointing arm, and with one of the spare Flamestorm gauntlets from the aggressor kit, I cut the wires off of it, and attached them onto the model with plastic cement like so. For the last stage of the main part of the tank, I used plastic cement to add a few parts from the Chaos Vehicle tank sprue, namely these small sections of spikes and a few of the plates. These were attached to the back of the tank, the sponsons, and the dozer blade respectively. Following this, I felt it was finally time to move on to the turret of the tank. Starting with the tank commander piece, I cut him out and cleaned up the sprue tabs with my scalpel. Following this, I took a house corridor gang leader upper torso and measured it up against the torso of the tank commander. I then cut the top of the torso off with my hobby snips and used my scalpel to shave down the cut till it was a height that I felt looked appropriate when combined with the corridor torso part. I then proceeded to get some green stuff, and again, more blue than yellow, to attach the 2 parts of the torso together. I then attached the head. I used one of the heads from the Free Guild Flagellant's head, which at the time of production is still available. I did only attach it at the end of the conversion though, hence why I put a still image over the original head that I used. But I shaved down the beard and attached it by adding a blob of green stuff into the neck hole and sticking it in. Other heads you could use are from the Bloodied kill team, that being the Enforcer's head or the head with the Chaos Star emblazoned into the forehead. I personally like the flames given off by the head I chose instead though. Whilst the green stuff was drying, I worked the rest of the turret. I shaved off the Imperial Aquila from the back and stuck a Chaos Spike rack on from the vehicle sprue over the top of the shaving down. I added a Storm Bolter. This was sourced from the Munitorum Armoured Containers kit, as it doesn't look too big and imposing as a Space Marine Storm Bolter does, and it adds to the tank just being a guard tank instead of like more of a Space Marine one. And then lastly, I also used a hatch from the same kit instead of the one that was present in the Leman Russ kit, as it had a Chaos Star on it. Once the green stuff had dried, I moved back to the arms on the tank base, where I dipped into the Bloodied kill team and grabbed an arm covered in bandages and the Power Fist from the Enforcer. I shaved down the left arm from the corridor ganger body down to the elbow, and dry fitted the power fist against it until I was happy with the look. I then glued the two parts together using plastic cement. Moving to the right arm, I cut it down just below the elbow and super glued it to the green stuff, in the corridor torso. Moving on to the right arm, I cut it down just above the elbow and then super glued it to the green stuff on the corridor torso. I lastly used plastic cement to attach the tank ace to the turret. And with that, that completes the non-sculpted part of the conversion. I now have a quite heavy segment of sculpting to do, however this is completely optional. It's up to you if you want to add this to your own model. I just personally like to add them myself. To begin with, I made a blob of green stuff, with more blue than yellow to increase its elasticity. I then rolled out several sausages of green stuff on a Ziploc bag that was lubricated with water and flattened them with a paintbrush, also lubricated with water. These were then cut in half with my scalpel and attached to the tank to look like rudimentary fastenings for the trophies. I did 2 per trophy. I then rolled out a bigger section of green stuff, again making it flat, but I then cut a chevron at one end to look like the base of a banner. This was then applied to the opening of the turret to act as parchment. I did later repeat this step with a few smaller sections of green stuff to add more parchment to the main body of the tank. I then took the leftover green stuff and mixed it with an equal amount of milliput to create what I like to call grilliput. This has the best properties of green stuff and milliput, without the negatives. However, the only problem is, sometimes it's not as tacky as either of the other materials. So, in order to get around this, you might need to use some super glue in order to just add a little bit of tackiness to the base of the area that you want to stick it to. I used this mixture to add chaos trim details to the models by flattening the grilliput with a silicone sculpting tool, and then cutting arrows out of the material with a lubricated knife. And please let me know in the comments if you want to see a more in-depth guide on how to do this in future. I did this a few times, twice on the turret and a following 6 times on the main body of the tank. Another thing you can do is flatten out a bit of sculpting medium over a section of tank, and then you can carve whatever symbol you want into it with a lubricated knife so you get an indented symbol, like I did on the side of the turret here. After leaving that all to dry, I took some pure milliput and made some sausages, where I then pressed them against the panels that I attached the dozer blade, before scoring some lines through a metal sculpting tool to look like welding marks. They're designed to look bad, as it is a chaos cult that's done this to the vehicle, and in the words of a mate who does weld, I'm afraid of tool misuse in this situation. I did this to both sides of the dozer blade for a more complete look. And lastly I had the candles. I started off by gluing several random heights of shafts made from dried grilliput over the model, on the sponsons and the turret. I then rolled out some grilliput sausages and wrapped them around the base of the candles. I then used the same metal sculpting tool well lubricated to pull the grilliput up into the stem of the candle to look like dripping wax. I then pulled the rest of the grilliput down, mostly backwards, in order to imply wax had melted and dried as the tank was moving forward. If there was any grilliput hanging over a ledge, I carefully sculpted some drips to them to make it look like it was falling over the edge. Next I put a spot of superglue on the tip of the stem before adding a small ball of grilliput to the top of this. I then flattened it with a sculpting tool and then added a divot into the ball for the flames. And then I dragged the excess down into the stem, to again look like wax strips. I left that overnight to dry, and then finally I added a small spot of superglue into the divot, before then making a small teardrop of pure green stuff which I then place into the superglue and curved backwards to imply wind or movement on the vehicle. I made the flames a bit longer as I prefer a more stylized look to my candles, however you can do them in any length you want to. And with that, the model was done. I gave a quick paint job, and here's how it looks. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated, however there is no pressure. Make sure you join me next time where I bring a chaotic twist to a classic staple of the Marine line, that can be used in both 30k and 40k games. I hope you have a wonderful day.